The swamps of Horry County, South Carolina, feel like a sinister void. They're shrouded in darkness with murky, forbidding depths, mud that swallows boots whole, and the lurking presence of snakes and alligators. At 4 in the morning, Peachtree Landing takes on an eerie, desolate place. It's a place people only visit with one chilling purpose: to dispose of a body in the water. Just a short distance from the shadowy swamps lies a picturesque region famous for its stunning beaches, including the renowned Myrtle Beach. This area features a diverse landscape of verdant forests, meandering rivers, and lively, inviting communities. Heather Elvis, at 20 years old, resided in this picturesque location as the eldest daughter of Terry and Debbie Elvis. Heather was particularly close to her father, keeping in touch with him daily through text messages. After graduating from St. James High School in 2011, she decided to embrace her independence by moving out to share an apartment with her best friend, Brianna Warren. Her parents, Terry and Debbie, fully supported this decision. When she was just 20 years old, Heather balanced her job as a waitress at the Tilted Kilt, a Scottish-themed restaurant in Myrtle Beach, with her studies in cosmetology. She was determined to fulfill her dream of becoming a professional makeup artist. Known for her creativity and ambition, Heather was also beloved for her warm, carefree, and positive demeanor. People smile when they talk about Heather because she was so full of personality, a friend remembered fondly. Another friend described her as outgoing, free-spirited, loving life. She always wanted to live it to the fullest. By the summer of 2013, Heather had been happily sharing an apartment with her best friend Brianna in Myrtle Beach for about a year. Her life was on an upward trajectory until a fateful encounter at the Tilted Kilt set off a series of events that would lead to tragedy. It was June 2013 when Heather first laid eyes on Sidney Mora, a 37-year-old married man who repaired kitchen equipment at the Tilted Kilt, where she worked as a hostess. From that moment on, something shifted within her. She openly expressed her desire for older men and her attraction to Sidney on social media, hinting at a forbidden relationship developing. Heather's story began with a spark of curiosity about Sidney, a man nearly twice her age and married with 3 children. Her social media posts and the accounts of those close to her reveal how this curiosity quickly grew into an obsession. By July, Heather's relationship with Sidney had likely evolved from a mere crush to something much more serious. This was hinted at in 2 Twitter updates she posted a minute apart, suggesting a possible affair. "Baby did a bad thing," she wrote, followed by, "I'm in way too deep, but watch me get deeper." Friends and co-workers of Heather Elvis recalled how she openly discussed her relationship with the married Sidney Mora. It was no secret that something scandalous was brewing between them. Sidney, a 37-year-old repairman, would often stop by the restaurants where Heather worked even when he wasn't on the clock. He'd bring her coffee and bagels, little treats that hinted at their deepening connection. At one point, Sidney even considered asking Heather to be a nanny for his children if he and his wife, Tammy, moved to Florida as they had planned. Heather and Sidney communicated constantly via mobile phone and would often meet in remote, isolated locations. Their relationship was a toxic roller coaster of emotions for Heather, as Sidney frequently claimed he was unhappy with his wife and planned to leave her, a promise he never fulfilled. Heather's friends warned her that Sidney, an older married man, was merely stringing her along. But this affair was far from a fairy tale romance. By mid-September, the secrecy and sneaking around had started to take a toll on Heather. On September 21st, she tweeted, Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well, suggesting she might have tried to end the affair or that the relationship had somehow faltered. And by late September 2013, their forbidden affair reached its bitter end. Tammy, Sydney's wife, had discovered the truth and she was furious. What unfolded next was a whirlwind of rage and retaliation. Tammy forced Sydney to call Heather and end things right then and there, with her listening in. Sydney didn't hold back, viciously tearing Heather down, calling her nothing but someone who spread her legs. It was a brutal verbal assault that left Heather feeling worthless. But Tammy's wrath didn't stop there. She sent the younger woman explicit texts and photos of herself and Sydney doing sexual things. It was a twisted form of humiliation, a way to assert her dominance over her romantic rival. To ensure Sydney remained faithful, Tammy resorted to extreme measures. She handcuffed him to their bed every night, changed his phone password to one only she knew, and accompanied him everywhere he went outside the house. Sydney agreed to these crazy rules, all in a desperate attempt to save his marriage. Tammy even made Sydney get her name tattooed above his crotch, a permanent mark of her ownership over him. Tammy also tried to get Heather fired from her job at the Tilted Kilt, calling the restaurant repeatedly and threatening that Sydney would stop repairing their equipment if they didn't let Heather go. Tammy wouldn't leave Heather alone. Although Heather's relationship with Sydney was over, she just wanted to put it all behind her. By the end of November, just over 2 weeks after receiving the last threatening text messages from Tammy, things started to look up for Heather. Sydney and Tammy had taken their 3 children on a 3-week road trip across California in their newly purchased Ford F-150 truck. With the Moors gone, Heather felt she could finally relax and breathe again, enjoying a break from Tammy's relentless harassment. But that wasn't the only positive development in Heather's life. She had secured her dream job as a makeup artist at a beauty salon and was scheduled to start work just before Christmas. Heather was overjoyed and couldn't stop talking about it with her friends and family. However, despite these positive changes, Heather was extremely worried about something that could potentially make the whole situation with the Moors much, much worse. At the beginning of November, Heather and her co-workers began to notice that she was gaining a significant amount of weight in a very short period. Heather became extremely concerned that she might be pregnant with Sydney's child. Overwhelmed with worry and fear, she decided to take a pregnancy test at the restaurant with the assistance of her manager, Jessica Cook. The pregnancy test, however, came back with an error, leaving Heather uncertain about whether she was carrying Sydney's baby. Heather's best friend recalled that Heather had taken the pregnancy test at work around the beginning of November and noted that she hadn't been sleeping with anyone else other than Sydney at that time. Despite her worries, Heather, ever the optimist, decided it was time to move on with her life and start anew by the winter of 2013. She hoped to find a new relationship and a happier future. The night of December 17, 2013 began like any other for Heather Elvis. She went on a first date with a man named Stephen Schiraldi, driving around and admiring the festive Christmas lights that adorned the neighborhood. Shortly after, they opted to venture to a nearby lot where Steve taught Heather how to maneuver his manual vehicle. Bursting with excitement, Heather sent a text message to her father accompanied by a smiling photograph, proudly declaring, "Just learned to drive stick. I'm a pro." Steve later mentioned that they had arranged to meet for a second date, and then he dropped Heather off at her apartment in Carolina Forest around 1:15 a.m. 20 minutes later, a mysterious call is made from a payphone to Heather's cell, lasting 5 minutes. She then calls her roommate, seeming frantic, claiming Sydney Moore wanted to meet her and said he's leaving his wife. These eerie events set the stage for her baffling disappearance in the early morning hours. Heather's whereabouts after 1:45 a.m. on December 18th remain unknown. The day following, on December 19th, a startling revelation emerged. Heather's Green Dodge Intrepid lay abandoned at the Peachtree Landing boat launch, situated 8 miles from Myrtle Beach, along the Hugelmaier River. This particular section of riverfront served as a landing point for small boats and was positioned at the end of a desolate stretch of road. The car was locked, but police quickly ran the vehicle's license plate through their registration system, revealing it was registered to Terry Elvis, Heather's father. Terry Elvis was relaxing at home, watching television in the living room, when police officers knocked on his door to inform him of the discovery of the Dodge Intrepid. Confused and unable to reach his daughter on her phone, he agreed to accompany the officers to Peachtree Landing to investigate. Upon spotting Heather's car parked in an unusual and isolated area, he was initially shocked but not overly concerned. Using a spare key he had, he unlocked the vehicle and allowed the officers to search it. Terry speculated that the car might have been taken due to its strange parking position. Maybe somebody moved it and left it there, he said. It didn't truly register with him where Heather was until the officer began searching through the car's contents. As the police couldn't find Heather's purse, keys, or cell phone in the car, Terry's concern escalated. Despite attempting to call her again, her phone appeared to be turned off. He then tried to find her at the Tilted Kilt, only to be informed by the staff that she wasn't present and wasn't scheduled to work until the following day. Recognizing that something was wrong, Terry remarked, "This is completely out of the ordinary. Heather's never done anything like this before. Something's wrong." Initially, the police department didn't consider Peachtree Landing and the vehicle as crime scenes, given the absence of broken glass, signs of a struggle, or blood in the area. However, they promptly initiated a missing persons case, with officers and volunteers beginning searches in the vicinity of Peachtree Landing. The day after her car was found, a search of the area around the boat landing turned up no signs of her. Later, rescue divers from Coastal Carolina University searched the riverbed down to Winya Bay, but found nothing. The man whom Heather had met on the night she was last seen was brought in for questioning, but swiftly cleared of all suspicion and released. At the center of the tumultuous romance between Sydney and Heather, as recounted by Heather's roommate, Brianna, and several Tilted Kilt employees, police detectives summoned Sydney for questioning. Sydney displayed evasive and unfriendly behavior from the start of the interviews. He adamantly denied being anywhere near Peachtree Landing on the night of the 17th or the morning of the 18th, asserting he had no contact with Heather whatsoever. Strangely, he claimed to be cruising around in his truck with his wife Tammy at the time, engaging in public sexual encounters, which they purportedly recorded on their phones. As investigators delved deeper into Heather Elvis's baffling disappearance, they turned to a crucial piece of evidence, her cell phone records. In the 2 hours after Heather had told her roommate Brianna about Sydney Moore's call to meet up, her phone showed considerable usage. However, investigators couldn't say for certain whether Heather herself was the one using it during that window. At 2:30 a.m., a call was made from Heather's phone to the very payphone that had allegedly been used by Sydney to call her earlier, but no one answered on the other end. Shortly after, the phone made its way to Longbeard's bar and grill in Carolina Forest, remaining there for 15 minutes. It then ventured as far as Augusta Plantation Drive, a considerable distance of roughly 4 miles away from Longbeard's, before circling back to the bar for another 15-minute stop. The phone's movements suggested it had left Longbeard's, and within 5 minutes, it was back at Heather's apartment for a brief 5-minute window. Investigators also turned their attention to the phone records of Sidney and his wife, Tammy Moorer. And what they found was a striking absence of communication between the couple's devices from November 2nd until the early morning of December 18th. Police also found video evidence connecting Sidney to Heather Elvis's activities on December 18th. Surveillance footage from a Myrtle Beach Walmart showed Sidney buying cigars and a pregnancy test at 1:12 a.m. The video from a gas station showed him making a call from a payphone to Heather's cell phone at 1:35 a.m. Investigators also checked security camera footage along the route between the Moorers' house and Peachtree Landing. 2 cameras captured a dark Ford F-150 passing in the direction of the landing, then returning in the opposite direction at 3:45 and 3:46 a.m. Although the license plate wasn't visible, experts later testified that the truck was an exact match to Sidney's vehicle. Sidney was the last person known to have spoken with Heather, and investigators suspected he was also the last individual to see her at Peachtree Landing. On February 21, 2014, the authorities made a bold move, closing off a section of South Carolina Highway 814 near the Moorer residence. Further damning evidence emerged when investigators acquired a search warrant for the Moore's residence. For 11 grueling hours, law enforcement meticulously searched the property, leaving no stone unturned. Tammy and Sidney had suspiciously discarded their home surveillance system on December 20th, only to install a new one the following day. While investigators couldn't retrieve the old system, they confiscated the new one. Reviewing the video footage, they observed Sidney and Tammy meticulously cleaning the passenger side of the truck and subsequently burning the rags used in the cleaning process. These actions occurred on the same day they installed the new home surveillance cameras. And then Sidney and Tammy Moorer were arrested at their own home, and despite there being no body, they were charged with murder as well. They needed to find Heather, but the couple were saying nothing. The list of accusations was staggering: murder, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and not one, but 2 counts each of indecent exposure. But it was the obstruction charge against Sidney that raised particularly troubling questions. Investigators claimed that Sidney had initially denied using a payphone to call Heather on the night of her disappearance, only to retract that denial when confronted with damning security camera footage that caught him red-handed. Despite their confidence in the evidence they had gathered, authorities lacked sufficient grounds to pursue murder charges against Tammy and Sidney. However, while the murder charges in Heather's case were dropped, the charges of kidnapping against the pair remained. With the murder charges dropped, they are now able to post bail and await their trial for kidnapping from the comfort of their own home. After their release, and despite a gag order, the duo turned to social media to proclaim their innocence, alleging they were set up. Sidney further amplified their message by delivering an interview.
It's all a game. Everything's a game, and it's not a game. It never has been a game from the very beginning. The meanness that I've seen come out of people, it amazes me. How you can be so mean to someone you know nothing about a subject you know nothing about something that we did not do.
As the wheels of justice began to turn, Sidney Moorer found himself at the center of a legal maelstrom. In June 2016, he stood trial for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis, with prosecutors presenting a mountain of circumstantial evidence, from cell phone records to damning security footage. But after days of intense testimony, the jury found themselves hopelessly deadlocked, resulting in a shocking mistrial. However, the legal battle was far from over. Months later, Sidney faced a separate trial for obstruction of justice, a charge stemming from his alleged lies to investigators during the initial stages of the case. The case focused on cell phone records and video from the morning Heather disappeared. And this time, the outcome was different. Sidney was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years behind bars, a small victory for those seeking justice for Heather. Nearly 5 years after Heather Elvis's baffling disappearance, all eyes turned to Tammy Moorer as she stood trial in October 2018. This time, the stakes were higher. She faced charges of kidnapping and conspiracy, drawing intense national media scrutiny. Prosecutors wasted no time in painting Tammy as a jealous, rage-filled woman driven to extreme actions by the possibility of Heather's pregnancy with her husband Sidney. Damning text messages she had sent to Heather, laced with vile insults like psycho whore, were presented as evidence of her vengeful mindset. After an intense 11-day trial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict: guilty on both counts of kidnapping and conspiracy. Tammy was sentenced to a staggering 30 years for each charge, to be served concurrently. For the Elvis family, the convictions of Sidney and Tammy Moorer represented a long-awaited victory in their quest for justice. Despite the convictions, one haunting question remained: what truly happened to Heather Elvis on that night in December 2013? With no body or direct evidence, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remained shrouded in mystery, fueling endless speculation and theories within the community and beyond. In the end, the disappearance of Heather Elvis remains a haunting mystery, one that has captivated the nation and left an indelible mark on the lives of all those touched by this tragic case. And if the Moorers were indeed responsible, what drove them to commit such a heinous act of violence against an innocent young woman? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell to never miss another gripping true crime tale. We'll catch you next time.